Up is Emil Flores. Emil Flores is an associate professor at the Department of English and Comparative Literature in UP Diliman. Aside from college English and various literature courses, he teaches courses such as creative writing for comics and popular literature for undergraduate and graduate students. He has delivered papers on comics and superheroes in different parts of the Philippines as well as in Singapore and the United Kingdom. His essays on comics have been published in the Philippines and the UK. His memoir, Virginia Tech Memories, published by the UST Publishing House, includes reflections on using comics in the American composition classroom. And he has co-written textbooks, Encounters and Thought and Expression, both published by CNE Publishing, that use comics as speculative fiction in the teaching of English. He's also the co-editor of the Espora ad Astra UP Press, a science fiction anthology, and has written stories that are included in the collection such as Tales of Enchantment and Fantasy, Bill Flores, and 9 supernatural stories from UP Press. He's also the writer of The Secret of Samson's Super Strength, a book for children published by OMF Literature. Second speaker is Carl Javier. Carl Javier is the managing editor of Anino Comics. He teaches creative writing at the Fine Arts program of Ateneo de Manila University. He got his BA in English and MA in creative writing from UP Diliman. Carl has been a fellow of the UP National Writers Workshop, the Dumaguete National Writers Workshop, and the UP Advanced National Writers Workshop. He has published books of fiction, creative nonfiction, criticism, and poetry. His most recent work is the comic book adaptation of Si Janus Silang at ang Tiyanak ng Tabon, which he made in collaboration with his former student, Natasha Windsor. Please welcome Prof. Emilio Flores.
Hey, all right. Thank you. I'll stay here. Yeah, so I was told to talk about comics in schools, and so I'll basically just give a short history of the comics class in the University of the Philippines in Vietnam. Okay, so actually began in a creative nonfiction class in 1993. I was writing about my sister's wedding in Virginia, and then that was also the first time I actually saw a huge comic book store. I've seen smaller ones before, but it's a huge comic book with a huge back issue collection. And I decided to incorporate that in my creative nonfiction piece. Basically, I talked about looking at back issues, and since I was writing for a non-comic book audience, I had to talk about the little bit of comics history, the collecting, and the direct market versus the traditional newsstand market, things like that. Basically, that's all under a story of me buying comics and then taking them to the back seat where my nephews would look at it and then open the plastic and wow, look, and just fold it up. And so basically, it was more of a comic collector's nightmare. You know, me like, oh my gosh, but I can't scold them because I'm in their car, and so, but they were all like, look at that. So that was the point of that chapter in this particular account. But during the workshop class, this is a grad workshop class under Cristina Hidalgo. Part of the criticism of that piece was it wasn't as narrative. It was divided into a narrative versus something that was discursive. The discursive part was about comics. And that was the criticism there. But interestingly enough, the weakness of that piece spawned the creative writing class. Because Cristina Hidalgo was so fascinated with that part. And in her own words, she was saying, this is a subculture I'm not aware of. And then after that class, she told me, do you think it's possible, because I was also teaching at UP that time, do you think it's possible for us to come up with a special topics class for creative writing, comics? And so the creative writing class began as a creative writing 198 special problems. Okay? Usually, these classes can be about publishing. Roberto Florentino handled that, publishing. Butch DeLisa handled it for writing, basically writing for money, okay? Writing for politicians and things like that. But when I was given this class, with the help of Cristina Hidalgo, it became writing for comics class in 1995. In the summer of 1995, I had about 6 students, okay? Basically taking up excerpts from scripts by Neil Gaiman and Kurt Busiek. We were really just looking at scripts because at this time, Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud had just come out and it wasn't in the Philippines yet. Okay? So we were just looking at scripts, Busiek scripts, Avengers, the Marvel Method. We were looking at full script by Neil Gaiman. And the students came up with a full script. Okay? Eventually, in 2004, the special classes, the special problems class became popular enough to merit its own course. So it's Creative Writing 180, Comic Book Writing 180. And this is just one of my earliest samples. You don't have to read, but I'm showing you the sample of the syllabus that was given there. So if you look at that, attendance 20%, reports 20%. You have to justify that it has to look like a class because it is credited. Okay, so it's not just a special topics anymore. It's a regular class. So you have to do that, and I had to defend it during the meetings. They were saying, is comics a legitimate genre? And I was saying, no, it's not a genre. It's a medium that has different genres. These are literary theory people. And then is fine arts going to have a problem with this because they already have this visual communication? So we have to clarify that this focuses on writing because it's from the English department and the creative writing concentration. So that's what we had to do before it was finally approved in 2004 as a regular course. And up to now, it's still being taught. So basic attendance, workshops, final project. The final project is basically a full script. Okay? It need not be illustrated, but that's an option that they want. The focus is just because it's a writing class. Okay? So these are just the samples. So what is a comic? Comics Grow Up by Roger Sabin. Excerpts from Dreamland Japan by Dick Shaw, manga. So there, MacLeod, of course, Soledad Reyes. So the thing about this class, it's not just a creative writing class because since it's the only comics class in the department and even in the College of Arts and Letters, I had to cram history and concepts and theory together with creative writing. Okay? So because students had to know what medium they're working on. Okay, so the class is divided to, so you have MacLeod, you have Romance and Realism, Changing Images of Heroes, Local Comics. I put in Batman there. It was, I guess the only popular mainstream character during that time in the movies. Okay, the Tim Burton and Schumacher ones. And then samples of comics, Sandman, Avengers Rough Cut to show the Marvel method, and then Batman Sanctuaries, Moon Knight, Scarlet and Moon Knight by Doug Munch, Bill Sienkiewicz, and so on and so forth. Okay? Art Spiegelman, Rumiko Takahashi, Ranma 1/2 was so big back then, very popular in terms of manga. So there. So the class, as I said, is divided into looking at the medium first before going into the actual writing. Okay, so that's what we did. Okay, so basically that's what, in terms of the theory part of comics, you have Scott McCloud, right? The first part, if you know, Scott McCloud says that in comics, iconography is the grammar of comics. So you have the iconography, abstract, stripping it down, in cartooning. The iconography of comics is what makes it powerful, right? On the left side, you have a realistic drawing, which can only stand for one person or a few people. Very, very specific. And then the more you make it iconic, the more universal it becomes. Right? So the last part, 2 dots and a line, that's almost everybody. Okay? That's why MacLeod, for example, and believes that, you know, the cartoon is so powerful. Okay? And I think especially, that's why manga, I think, is very powerful. It transcends culture because of this principle of iconography. So that's what we study. Okay? So looking at iconography, and then the other one, again, according to MacLeod, if iconography is the what do you call it, vocabulary of comics, the grammar is closure. So these are panel transitions when you tell a story, moment to moment, action to action, subject to subject, scene to scene, aspect to aspect, non sequitur. The relationship between two panels, okay, in fact, that's why MacLeod calls it the invisible art. So much happens between the gutter. Okay, and it depends on your mind's closure, how your mind supplies closure. If it's moment to moment, practically no closure, open eyes, close eyes, right? Like film. But the more action to action, one panel, one action, a little bit more closure. But the different transitions requires more closure. Like for example, scene to scene. He can't outrun us forever. 10 years later, there you go. So you have 10 years in between two panels. Lots of closure that you have to fill up. Okay? He says that is the grammar of comics. That's where comics derives its power. So that's what we discuss. It's just a very truncated example of what we do there. And then, so we also do comics history and concepts. So we have essays by Karina Constantine, Scott MacLeod, Patrick Parsons, Soledad Reyes, who is one of the first people in the academe from Ateneo to actually study comics. Okay? These are the comics magazines. Right? She's really heavily into popular culture. Right? She's one of the first to really write and take comics seriously. Roger Sabin, British writer, and Frederick Shaw, American writer, who studies manga. He was one of the first Americans to actually codify manga for the West. Okay? So these are what we look at in terms of history and concepts. And then for actual comics writing, you have instructional texts. So I show students, you know, different ways of writing it, from Daniel Cooney, who's a very good, from visual descriptions of characters to the actual doing of comics. Okay? Colleen Doran, okay? She's heavily into manga right now, so she gives examples on different kinds of writing. The manga style is more thumbnails, what they call names, right? Of course, Will Eisner, the one who basically pioneered the idea that comics are sequential art. Okay? Of course, Dennis O'Neil, writer-editor for DC Comics. Okay? So these are, he basically applies the 3-act structure for comics and compares plot first versus full script. Okay? Plot first is what became known as the Marvel method. Stan Lee would just write the plot, this is what's going to happen, gives it to the artist, artist draws it, goes back to him, then he supplies the dialogue. Right? Because it's faster, and there are strengths and weaknesses to that method. But the full script is the writer, and this is actually what we use in class because it's a writing class. Full script, the writer controls everything from paneling to transition to everything. Okay? Full description for the artist. Okay? So there. This is just an example of, I just found it when I was digging through my files. This is what a student did in my class. Okay? So she can draw. So she had that advantage, and so this example. This was just an exercise. I just told them meeting a stranger. You know, so I used creative writing techniques, and this is what she did. This is the first page. So she meets this strange old woman who's asking if she wants to buy a curse. Okay, and so she did. I only put the first page. She did a 3-page short episode. Okay. So that's the example that she did. That's what she did in class. Okay, so she had the exam. Not most of the students are writing students, but we do get students from fine arts also, and those who can draw. So it's an example of what we did, what she did. In 2006, I was offered to teach Comparative Literature 171 Popular Culture. This course has always been around in UP. Just to introduce, in UP we have the Department of English and Comparative Literature. We have different concentrations. Okay, so you have English studies language, you focus on language and practical linguistics. English studies literature, which is mostly Anglo-American literature. You have comparative literature, which focuses on Asian and world literature. Okay? And then creative writing. Those are the four concentrations. So the earlier course I was talking about was from creative writing. But since I teach comics, sometimes the comparative literature, people would ask me to teach CL 171. Popular literature can range from detective stories, romance, science fiction, and fantasy. As long as it's popular. Okay? So when it was given to me, I taught comics. And this is different. This is not a writing class. This is a literature class. So it's about criticism and analysis of comics. So what I do is the readings are different. They're not going to produce a script. They're going to produce a critical essay, but on comics. So again, I have to show the students history, culture, and different essays on how to analyze comics. So I have essays by Gary Engel, who wrote a very interesting essay about Superman, how Superman represents America. Okay? And then you have Paul Gravett. He's a British historian and the writer of comics. I use him for manga because he had a huge volume in manga, but he's actually very global. He writes and criticizes comics from a global perspective. John Lent, he's American. He used to teach, I think, in USD. I'm not sure, MassCom in UP. He's American, but he's actually the writer of the History of Filipino Comics, published by Mango Comics. John Lent. Okay. Yeah. Scott McCloud, of course. Roberta Pearson, she's an American academic, studies Batman. Okay. Soledad Reyes, I already mentioned. Richard Reynolds, very interesting. He has a very interesting, fascinating, very helpful book on superheroes as modern mythology. Okay. And then Frederick Short for manga. Randy Valiente, an artist and writer for Philippines, but he has analyzed how he differentiates traditional Filipino comic storytelling from Scott McCloud. Basically, he says that if the U.S. is in the comics is sequential art, in the Philippines is visual literature. It's more word-based than art-based, the traditional comics. So that's his perspective. And of course, Douglas Woke, who analyzes the very structure and concept of comics. He actually deviates a lot from Scott McCloud, so it's a good debate. So yeah, he says comics is not literature, it's not film, it's its own creature. Okay? Here in the Philippines, we look at it as literature. Douglas Woke says it's not really literature. It's not even art. So yes, its own view. It could be para-literature. So again, basically what this does is we problematize comics. And so we look at comics as communication and expression. The first image is from Scott McCloud. Basically, comics can be used to make things simple and clear. In fact, there's a study, I think NASA did it, a study on which the more effective way to convey information in the clearest possible way. They say it's comics. That's why when you look at the airplane, how to evacuate, right? But then it's called a diagram, it's not called comics. But actually it is comics, because it's the clearest way. That's why politicians use comics to tell their lives. That's why I've been invited to speak at the UN and DFA here to see how they can use comics for, these are different secretaries from different government agencies. And then they did that, how to have financial knowledge, how to battle dengue, So that's what they're using, because comics is the clearest way to tell that, to communicate. But on the other hand, comics can also be used for expression, for artistic expression. And this is from David Mazzucchelli's Asterios Polyp. So again, this is not meant to make things clear. In fact, this is meant to make art. So you have the way he tells the story. The main character is more logical. Okay, that's why even the way he's drawn is in shapes. The woman there, and even the color, she's an artist. Okay, so you don't read this literally, meaning objectively that this is what's happening in a very literal way, but in a figurative way. See, comics can do that. Comics can make, it's not about making things as clear as possible, but it's just like literature or poetry. It's how you express it. And you have multiple layers of meanings when you combine words and pictures. Okay? So those are the different ways of looking at comics. And of course, you see, particularly in CL, we look at the historical, political, and cultural relevance and how you approach comics. So the image there, of course, is from Mouse, the Pulitzer Prize winner. So history, autobiography / biography. Mouse has been taught in ethics classes in the US, things like that. And of course, the iconography of using animal imagery, mice. So you have comics, iconography, comics theory, but also historical, political, and cultural. The Jewish experience during World War II, okay? Political aspects of it. Okay. Another example could be Persepolis, Jeans and Papi. Okay? So that's how we discuss comics, particularly in the literature classroom. And then, so when I was doing this, the question is, okay, what's the point for students? For many, it's just a class where they learn something and they get 3 credit units. But for some, they actually take it to graduate school. So Andrea Peterson, I think for now, he's in UP. She was the first back in 2007 for her master's thesis, a creative writing master's thesis, is her graphic novel, No Rest for the Wicked, fairy tale re-envisioned in graphic novel. Basically, she has an essay on how fairy tales are re-envisioned, and then her actual work is her comics. Okay? And we had to bring in Soledad Reyes from Ateneo because there weren't any experts from the college. So they had to bring in someone. I was the advisor, but the others were literary people. They can criticize it, but they felt that they needed somebody else. Soledad Reyes is there. And the defense, it was actually quite a seminal defense. And she passed with high marks. And yeah. So for now, I think she's the first and so far only grad student in the college to do comics. That's a sample of her comics. All her lettering is handwritten. It's a really thick piece, and it wasn't even finished. We had to decide. It's only one arc. It's almost like 200 pages, I think, like that. So that's it done. So okay. So that's what she did. And then for the undergrad, just in 2013, Daniel Balbuena did a very good thesis on overseas Filipino warriors. That's the title of his comics. And then applying the hypertrophic deconstruction to the comic superhero. And the essay is very good, actually. Very good. Even some non-comics people, like professors from poetry and writing, they're saying you should submit this to be nominated for best thesis by an undergrad. I thought it was really good, but to hear it from other people who are not familiar with comics, I said, yeah. And we didn't win, but but still, the fact that it was nominated. Okay, so that's what he did. His thesis actually it's a very well written thesis about deconstruction, the hypertrophic deconstruction of superheroes. Hypertrophic, he gets it from Ian Thompson, how you expand a notion, look deep into the notion of a concept, and then you expand it until it falls apart. The metaphor there is like a plant bending and from the weight of its own fruit. Okay, so that's how he applies the concept of the super in the Philippines. It's almost similar to Filipino Heroes League, if you're familiar with that, actually. So that's his essay, but rest of the thesis is the script. I didn't include the illustrations. He had illustrations there, but the focus of the thesis was the script, since it's still a creative writing class. So that's for students. So this is what they can do with comics in their academic life. And I'm just going to say that from 1995 to 2014, I've written essays on comics and superheroes. So the latest one is from Oxford, Interdisciplinary Press, 2014. I am not a film critic of any sort, but I delivered a paper on Filipino superhero films in Singapore, which was published by Mascom. And this was Sultana, I think, Nick Campo was there also. So it's very fascinating talk. And yeah, one of my earliest essays, Comics Crash, Filipino Comics and the Quest for Cultural Identity, okay, 2004. And my first essay, actually, Comics in the Classroom, for the Philippine Journal for Language Teaching, May 1995. How comics are used in teaching English. Okay? So those are just some essays I've written, and I've been fortunate enough to actually talk with comics, about comics, different parts of the country and abroad. And yeah, this is the book that eventually was published. Carl Javier's essay is also there, and we were really, very fortunate to write with that great guy in Oxford, speaking about reading papers about Filipino comics. So Carl Javier was there, and Micaela Chua, writing about 13. And yours was on the, what's this?
Makoy.
Yeah, Makoy, yeah. Was that the one, the radio?
Makoy in Filipino humor.
Yeah, Makoy in Filipino humor, yeah. And it was very well written. If we can say so ourselves.
Yeah.
It was pretty well received, I think, in the UK. Of course, they've never heard anything like that. Okay? And that's what I tell people, actually, students. Not to be crass, but most of the world is just waiting to learn more about our culture and about our lives. And to me, to us, comics is a very good way to represent culture. And ultimately, that's our goal. That is my goal in writing. Produce comics that reflect Philippine culture for a global audience. Expressing, it can be for communication, it can be for expressing yourselves, but ultimately, for me at least, it's showing something about Philippine culture. Especially now, there's the internet, there's so much interest, not just Philippines, all over. Okay? Same way we are interested in other cultures. Okay? And I always remember Neil Gaiman, cultural dialogue. We can use comics as part of the cultural dialogue. We get something, but we give something. And Neil Gaiman will say, many Filipinos feel that for decades we just get. We get American culture, we get Japanese culture, increasingly Korean culture. But we give. That's why up to now for us, when there's a passing mention of the Philippines, like in Neil Gaiman's book or a TV show, we're so giddy. That is symptomatic of our position. We're not part of the dialogue. But it's nothing new really. Even the Japanese felt that before manga and anime became popular. And the Americans felt that they were bombarded by European culture, and they were wondering, what is American culture? We should do something. And that's what Mark Twain was doing, William Dean Howells, that's what they were doing in the realm of literature. So that's what, for me, that's what I'm looking at, of course, with comics. Thank you. Okay.
So next speaker will be Carl Javier.
Hey guys. I don't have a presentation. I'm trying not to feel bad about that. Okay, so Sir Emil was my teacher, and so I kind of got to take the ball and run with it. I got to teach the comics class in UP, and now I'm teaching a comics class in Ateneo. And so I guess from that base of where things started, I'll just talk about how I run my class and like the kind of innovations that I've introduced to the way that I run it, which are based on essentially like my beliefs in creative production and in process. So if we're to boil it down to like two core ideas, one is the only way to learn how to make comics is to make comics, and then two is based on a Warren Ellis like entry where he says the role of the writer is to make the artist do what they want. So in these two things, it's that we must make comics, and then we must in the making of comics, we have to be not, the writer isn't just a person who produces text that is to be interpreted. The writer is essentially a project manager that has to make sure that the art is moving along and that the artistic vision is being fulfilled. And we wind up talking about these different methods. Earlier, we heard about full script and Marvel method. And what part of my class is understanding how you work with your artist. Like, you find your artist and you try and figure out how it is, because I've worked with a lot of different writers and a lot of different artists, and each time, like, the process is always different with each artist. Like, there are artists who want the full script, and then there are artists that you can hand off a concept to, give them like page one, this and that, kind of like Marvel method, and then they'll give it back to you. It's amazing. And then you have to learn how to like understand that space that you work in as a writer. So the way that we do our classes is I essentially kind of beat down my students until they do what I want. It is that kind of it's a very aggressive process of teaching. If only because I come from a very traditional model of teaching. I am a graduate of like KP, creative writing programs. So the way that the programs were run was that you would come into class, you'd read the literature, and then you would produce work, and then everybody gets like a calendar schedule, and then usually get one round of workshop for one piece, and then another round for a different piece. And then based on that one round of workshop, you get revisions. And then it's up to you how far you take those revisions. And that was pretty effective for me. But as I started like working more with a lot more people, and as I started doing self-publishing and collaborating, I realized that there is something to be gotten from multiple drafts, and there's a lot to be gotten from multiple iterations. So I kind of saw what like tech people do and like what design people do, which is you come up with a very early design, and it probably won't work. But the fact is that you've iterated, and if you've put something down, and once you have that something down, then you can start like messing with it and building on top of it. But until you have something down to mess with, you're not going anywhere. So the way that the class is structured is, we don't have readings in the traditional sense where you come to class and you talk about it. There is a reading list that has MacLeod and Will Eisner, and I put in Alan Moore's on writing. And then if you dig deep enough into the internet, there's a Warren Ellis guide on writing. And it's really, really hard to find, but it's great. And it was never compiled into a book. So I remember one of my collaborators, Adam David, just gave me a printed out photocopied version, and I kept that around for a really long time. So we have sets of text, and then whenever a student is working on something, I wind up recommending like similar work that they should look at. So there's no fixed reading list syllabus apart from the core understanding comics, reading comics by Douglas Swope. So it's essentially like the same core stuff, but we don't talk about it in class unless it comes up as a necessity. So what happens is the shift goes from the traditional kind of literary approach of understanding it, because I imagine that I'm offloading that work to the literature class. And so now my job as the creative writing teacher is to force my students to produce a comic. So at the start of the semester, they come in thinking, whatever, I'm just gonna explore my emotions and stuff. But then they realize that at the end of the semester, everyone has to have a 20 to 28 page comic or they fail. And it's not enough that they produce that 20 to 28 page comic, but they have to put up a booth at Komikon. And so my last two classes, so when you come in as a student, but as the semester progresses, you become a comics label. And so by the end of the semester, you're a comics creator. Okay? And then I play boss, because I'm the teacher. because I'm an aggressive editor, the first phase of it is students coming in and pitching their work, right? And it begins at the elevator pitch level. Because I said the traditional way is you're all off in imagining, and then you all show up with like a draft, and then you work on that draft. I do not allow students to commit a single word to the page until they can compel me with a 3-sentence elevator pitch. And if you can't express a great idea in three sentences, then you have until next week to pitch another idea. And next week. In Ateneo, we started class in August. It's November now. I still have one student who has no concept. That person is probably going to fail. Yeah. Because until you get that concept passed, it's not worth writing. Like that's just my principle for it. If you cannot come up with a clear hook, then there's no sense in it, especially if it's a first comic. I understand like people want to do avant-garde or very art comic stuff, but I really feel that you have to start with narrative comic. And you have to start by learning how to tell a story using the core mechanics of the medium, which is pages and panels and page turns and stuff like that. So they start off with the elevator pitch. And I ask students to always come up with 5 elevator pitches. And then usually within the first 2 weeks, everyone is depressed because nothing gets approved in the first 2 weeks. It takes about 3 weeks, 4, before somebody finally pushes something through. If only because sometimes it's almost there, but I can't hear it. Sometimes there's the seed of a concept, but they cannot explain it yet. So basically, if you can't tell the story, then you probably won't be able to write it. Okay? And so that's the first level of iteration. Maybe you have the seed of an idea, but you haven't really thought about the world. Okay, well, pitch again next week. See ya. And so there's just constant bouncing and iteration. The next step, after you get your concept approved, is you have to write a 1-page synopsis of the story. Okay, and then that 1-page synopsis kind of gives you a sense of how much the author has imagined it so far. Right? So if on the page it's all backstory, then you understand that there's no narrative flow yet. So that early on into the process, you can identify weaknesses in the story. And therefore, they don't wind up making those bigger mistakes later on. Because one of the hardest things to do, like I remember when I used to teach like a fiction class, is you get a 20-page story and none of it works. But this person has already written 20 pages of fiction. So if you step in at concept level and you stop them and say that's not going to work, then you've saved so much time. And then from concept to synopsis, then you can identify, just building on core concept, is there a story that can function? And then we move from the synopsis to page breakdowns. So I asked them to do like 1 to 2 sentence descriptions of each page. Because that way, you can see how the thing will flow narratively. Like very simply, one of these things that I get a lot is the main conflict begins on page 15 of a 22-page comic. So if you were to translate that to another medium like film, that means that your main conflict starts like 45 minutes into the film. That's not going to work, right? So they have to front load it. And so when we are talking about all of these mechanics, that's when the theory stuff comes in. That's when I can start referencing all kinds of fiction writing concepts, right? So rather than starting off reading theory and then writing a comic, we start by making the comic, and then we stop, and then we study theory, and we sneak that in, so that the next revision that the person does has worked in that theory, right? Because sometimes people come in and they don't know, like Freytag's triangle, right? Or they'll come in and they're not familiar with the 3-act structure. So then you introduce that way of thinking. I mean, once you've been writing, it kind of sounds automatic, like these things seem like they're automatic, but for everybody who's starting out, like, everybody has a different level, and then everybody's reading different comics. Everybody has a different sense of what they want to do. Crucial to this entire process is the participation of the class. So for example, now that I'm older, I find myself always in class asking, am I just being old and masungit that I cannot dig this concept? Like, am I just detached from your culture? There's this clear divide. It's like there's this generational divide. I have been told, sir, kasi it's a concern of our generation. So, the class should actively participate, and you can tell like when someone's pitching something and everybody's getting excited, because the way that I want them to imagine is they're not just working on their own projects, they are contributing to their entire comics line, right? And so they're not just pitching a personal project, they're pitching a project that fits within a line of comics that will all be released together under one banner, right? And so you can't have like 5 out of 10 superhero comics, right? You need a variety. So everybody's kind of working in coordination, feeling it out, going through that. So once we reach the breakdowns, I start asking for breakdowns and concept art, right? Because we need to have a general sense of how it is. I'm not a terribly big fan of concept art, if only because there are certain artists who just really, really fall in love with making concept art, and then when you make them do pages, they stop. And it's just like, I don't need any more concept art, I need pages, right? And that's kind of where you see things going. At the page breakdown stage, my students will divide, and half of them will progress from page breakdowns to thumbnailing, and then the other half will go to full script. And then they get to choose, like at what point do I hand off? So if it's thumbnailing, that's fine, they bring the thumbnails into class, those thumbnails get workshopped. If it's full script, then that goes out to their artist. Their artists are submitting pages as we go, and then those artist pages come into class, and then we go over them and see if they move and if they're logical. There's just so many steps to it, and what we build in, or what I build into the class, is opportunities to step in and intervene, and to kind of help that. It sounds really disruptive, and it sounds like if you're a creator, if you're a creative person who takes like, I just really want to express myself, this really sounds like a terrible system to operate under. But the constraints are what build in like much better work. Like, the general experience is students hate me all through the sem. Just hate it, and they hate coming to class, and they hate having to have a new draft, and they hate it when I go, where's your stuff? Right? And they have nothing, and there's no new iteration. But by the end of the semester, like one of my favorite moments was the last Komikon. There's a student running through here, running into the Indi Changi at 3 o'clock, and he does this, and he looks like the guy in Platoon. Like falls on his knees and says, I made it, my comic is here. And there's this sense of accomplishment because he produced that comic. So I move away from I move away from the very academic, scholarly approach, if only because that's kind of not my demeanor. I'm really more interested in basically filling all those tables with more comics, because no one is ever really good at the start. And that's one of those things that people need to let go of, right? Your first comic is probably going to be shit, and that's okay. And your second is probably going to be shit, but it's always best to get the shit out of the way first, right? And if you produce your shitty comic when you're an undergrad who's enrolled in a comics class, then great, right? Rather than you're like in your mid-20s and then you decide to make a shitty comic and you don't have an excuse as opposed to, well, I was in college, I was learning, right? No, you have to iterate. And so I guess that's just my main focus is it's iteration, it's project management, it's an approach to comics that isn't as academic in the classroom, but really is focused on turning students into comics creators. Right? And I think like the larger aspect of that is it's an incredibly empowering process. Because once people walk away and they have that comic, it leads to many other things. I'm really proud to say that like the last time that we Abangan editors, for those who don't know, I edit Abangan the Best Philippine Comics. So the last time that we had a meeting to choose the works for the next Abangan, the other 3 editors had nominated one of the comics that was produced for my class, right? So it gets that good. And very clearly, like there's a lot of work from previous comics classes that have transitioned into like much larger work, or creators who have transitioned into doing bigger and more interesting things. And it's providing those people with that transitional like stepping stone. If you want to get a look at some of these comics, like, you go around, there's a fair number of comics that are available, but I probably recommend there's a table there. John Cesario and Michelle Bacalbac were part of my first comics class, and they're selling stuff that was produced there and their newer work. So yeah, that's kind of how I run the class. If you guys have questions, we can probably go to that now.
Could maybe start with a round of questions to get the ball rolling. For the both of you, are the subjects you teach optional or elective?
They're elective.
They're elective.
Yeah, they're still they're elective but like it won't appear in a required curriculum, but it is they are official courses. For example, CW 180, you get credit for a CW class. So CL, the comparative lit class, you get credit for that. But it's not like there's a track that you follow.
We were trying to do that before, right?
Also, people have been asking for that because what about the students who really want to follow that track?
How about can students from from other courses attend your class, or maybe if they're not part of the university, can they enroll in your classes?
Not the university.
From other courses, definitely. Like it's been a great experience. A lot of people who are not from creative writing have like come in and done really great work.
Yeah. In fact, sometimes people from, for example, engineering and business administration, they do good work actually. For some reason, because to them it's a respite perhaps from their other work, and these are students who just love comics. Okay, so they do that. Other schools, sadly, no. But I always allow sit-ins, so I have people from all over sitting in from Korea. So
I do not, because of the nature of the class.
Yeah.
It's very combative.
So what's your schedule?
But usually they sit in during lectures and discussion, but obviously they can't during workshops.
Yes.
Because they can't. They just want to listen. Although I'm not sure if that's still okay, because some administration people don't like that actually. So,
What I do though is sometimes I invite like comics creators if they're hanging around in the area, especially during pitching season when students have to come up with their concepts, and like let them kind of help the concepts along.
Yeah.
And how are they graded?
quality.
Merong criteria for percentage or
Yeah.
sinusunod.
We have to do
Yeah,
that.
we have to do that.
We're required to do that, but
Even if it's an electric test?
yeah. Mainly just to help, because it's just to cover your bases. Because if just in case there's a problem and somebody complains, you have to show that you have some,
Yeah.
some basis. But so far, no one is complaining. But just to be, and it's required to show what you do as an academic. It's really an academic thing.
Yeah.
As an academic subject. It's really logistics and things like that, and policy of the university. But otherwise, how can you put a numerical grade on creativity? That's always for me. But, you do. You have to have some numerical equivalent.
I have 3 requirements: attendance, participation, and final project. That's
Yeah.
it.
That's mine basically. But I give in terms of attendance, and I tell students, attendance overall is important, but participation, particularly in workshops, that is key. Because some students usually attend when it's their work that's being workshopped and then disappear. Right? And I have to remind them, no, it's like what Carl Joe said, the participation is important. And I tell them, see what happens when you don't attend during workshops. It's not just you who's missing something. Your classmates miss something. And sometimes even the class can't move forward.
For me though, I leave them behind. Like if you're not showing up in class, like if everybody's working on script, and you're still at like synopsis, dude, that's your problem.
Yeah, actually me too.
Screw you.
If you miss your workshop, no more.
Yeah.
Right now, this sem I have a student who's like that. If you miss your workshop, no more.
You can't make the class wait for you.
Yeah.
Everybody's running.
Question ko lang, you said kasi your final requirement is they to release it at Komikon.
Yeah.
Parang for me lang, what's the ethics of that? Like, for what it's walang Komikon that year, or it's after or second, naubusan sila ng slots. Or third, parang sino magbayad ng booth? Unless sagot mo yung booth. So,
Very simply, Sherry. I contact Sherry every semester.
Okay.
They get
You
it.
put them in the Javier,
Yeah.
since it's free and you only get 10% from their sales.
Yeah. And because so I didn't get to mention it earlier, but I also want them to become aware of the economics of being a comics creator. Like how much do you spend? How much, if you're paying your artist, how much are you paying your artist? And if not, how are you splitting sales? How much does production cost? Run you for your print run of X number of copies? How much do you sell it for, and therefore how much do you quantify that your art is worth? Right? This semester I didn't do that because Ateneo did their calendar shift this year, so it was very hard for me to do the logistics for it, and also it was my first semester teaching there, so I thought the shift would be too difficult. I am required to produce 50 copies, and then I'm getting my students a table at BLTX, so getting them like opportunities to sell. So finding opportunities, because I feel like part of becoming a comics creator is engagement in there. So like yesterday, today, my students have been like wandering Komikon because I told them you have to see what the environment is, right? You have to understand the ecosystem in which you're producing comics. You have to understand the comics that are out there. It's not like we're just like reading Marvel and DC an image and then we're producing. You have to understand like the climate, and therefore that dictates. Like so, they're like, is it full color? Is it, And then you say, if you make it full color, you're selling it for like at least $100. Who are you to sell something for $100 at Indie Changi? It's like, it's bringing them to that point where they have to think like a creator and not like a student who's just submitting for a grade. And I've always felt that that's more fulfilling when you're creating something beyond that will go beyond the classroom. Does that answer your question?
Okay, for Professor Flores, the reading list you showed us a while ago, the sample writers that you discussed in your class, they're almost all foreigners, aside from Soledad and
Yeah,
Gabriel.
yeah.
Question is there anyone else right now who is writing stuff about our local comics that might someday also be used in future?
Well, I was really thankful that
Aside from you guys.
that Randy Valiente wrote his essay, Understanding Filipino Comics. Because aside from that, Sol Reyes, it's really just Sol Reyes usually. And then there's her, and then Randy Valiente. Dennis Villegas also, but not. But it's more of his is more history, right? So it's not analyzing text. Actually, that's the thing also, and I'm glad you reminded me because we're actually with the book. We've been, and it's my fault, I've been busy for 10 years. We've been coming up with a book. In fact, I already talked to May Aurelia and Paolo Manalo. Once I get their essays, we can get our book going. Because there's Carl Joe's work is there, Paolo Manalo, Randy Valiente, May Aurelia, Ancheta. So all these people who are doing things for comics, that's because no one has done that. So in fact, basically, yeah, I'm guilty. It's my fault that I haven't really.
I submitted my essay.
I know. Yeah, I know. I've been waiting for.
I need to update that.
Yeah, you have to update that. Even my essays are totally passe. But yeah, once I get Paolo Manalo and May Aurelia, we'll come up with an actual book of essays in the Philippines. Because yes, definitely. The thing is, even the manga texts are from Americans and British. Right? I'd like to get. I'm talking with Dr. Yukari Yoshinara if I can get translated texts from Japan, because there are essays from Japan, but it's just not translated yet.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
related to that, are you like limited to written text? Because there's other formats din naman,
Yeah.
like audio
Oh,
and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
video. Or even like si Jerry, I mean Jerry posted in blog, meron siyang, I don't necessarily agree with his views, but he has views din naman on what is Filipino comics for example. So I mean
we do. Actually, what do you mean in terms of sources?
Yeah, yung citation kasi usually nga yung mga ganun we're dependent on physical textbooks, but
Yeah.
for me that's why I want to record to at least my public record that the people can reference nga yung audio or video, or baka sa din ng workshop puro video na lang.
Actually,
baka
yeah.
your book and essay might be a video na lang
Maybe.
or something.
Actually, to me, that's just due to my technical limitations and and UP's limitations.
No, not like Korean.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, but question ba, is CUP ba kailangan ba physical text?
No. It's just us in our funding for our college. We have one. What do you call that?
Like one,
The screen.
we have 3 projectors. We have one room that everybody has to share when they want to use like a
Yeah, so
TV.
it's really that.
Now that I'm in Ateneo,
Wala din silang budget eh.
I'm so used to not having anything.
Wala silang budget, but siyempre they're slightly,
No,
yeah.
slightly more funded.
No, but they're like, do you need a projector? I've never used one really.
But that's a good point. Because they can get interviews and a lot of knowledge, especially for comics. It's in forums like this that they're not really written down.
Yeah, I took a MOOC before that was all like videos. I was reading comics, reading theory, and then a lot of creator interviews.
Yeah. We do that. I also invite creators. Oliver Isabedra, the one who did Asper, 1990s. Yeah, one of the first Filipino comics published abroad with NTP. Yeah, we invited him, so that was quite interesting. Yeah.
Question good?
For Ricardo, did the students in your class, when they signed up, did they know that there would be a required output at the end of the class?
It's part of my syllabus.
Okay, so when they signed up, they
No, like they get the syllabus on the day, but on the first day of class, you do have the opportunity to change math and to go to another class. If you choose, if you're not down for that, then you can change math, and that's okay.
Yeah. The way the school system works, you don't get the syllabus when you sign up. On your first day of class, the teacher should give the syllabus, and then that's when they see a requirement.
So my question was, did you get any feedback on how your students, you talked about how they changed from a student to a comics creator. Did you get any feedback as to how they felt about that transition they made? I mean, my question was, I was hoping maybe some of them weren't expecting it, but it turns out they knew what they were getting into. Yeah. So what was the feedback that you got from them on that transformation?
I'm not exactly the easiest person to talk to, especially when I've been when I've been beating on your work all semester. But like Charles said, my name shows up in the thank you, so it's there. And then now that they're not so afraid of me, like once time has passed, and then they're kind of, because I can't speak really exactly for what they feel, but I feel like one of the most rewarding things is when they're no longer like students, but they're peers. Like basically, the reason why I put like in my author bio for today that Natasha was my student is because she created art for one of the projects in my first ever comics class, and now she is my collaborator for like a major release. So it's that that transition I feel is, it's a big thing. The fact that I'm seeing my students, sitting at their tables now. They have their own tables and stuff. That's just that. I feel like that speaks for it.
How do you handle those students who get, of course, most of the time offended sila because you're criticizing their words. How do you deal with them? You prevent them from
I usually tell them about how brutally I have also been critiqued. And I kind of make it clear that I'm also not very kind to myself in terms of my view. I hate everything that I've ever written. I hate it. The only thing I ever like is a project that I'm working on at the start. And then somewhere in the middle I hate it until I finish it. And then so I'm very clear that I'm very difficult to please, like my taste. But also, I make it clear that just because, the problem is the larger system in which we operate, where you submit and then you get a grade, and that is the valuation of you as a person and as a student. And we don't provide space for failure. And once you build in opportunities for iteration, what you're doing is you're breaking that consciousness of exam, failure, success, and then value of me as a creator. And you start saying, iterate, do something crappy, and then let's see if we can take that crappy thing, find the good elements, reconfigure, new iteration. Okay, this is better. Where is that working? At the start, it's a really rough process because people aren't used to it. People are not used to being critiqued. People are not used to being told like, dude, this does not work. But once you open up and you say, like, I make it clear that whatever critique I have of the work is not a reflection of them as a human being. It's a reflection of them as a creator who's attempting to create something, and I am a critic who is attempting to help them move it forward, right? Like the work of the comics editor is to craft, like is to support the comics creator in creating work. So, for example, I work with, like, if you guys have seen 66, right? I work with Russ, who just left, and Ian Santa Maria. So, my job as an editor is to step aside and wait for them to submit, because that's how good they are. And then when they hit a stumbling block, when they hit a creative point, then they go, hey man, how do we fix this story point? And then that's where I dive in. Because they're that good. But then because I'm working with new creators, aspiring creators, then it needs a more aggressive approach. And if you subject yourself to that more aggressive approach early on, then you realize that, hey, like, opening yourself up to critique actually makes you a better creator. It really becomes a matter of how much students will hold on to their ego. Like, if you let go, you subject yourself to the process, and then you start seeing your work getting better, then it's okay. But if you're holding on to your ego, and I don't want to get critiqued, I don't want to do my work, whatever, there's gonna be no progress and there's gonna be no growth. So it's just that's just how it is. So I mean, I don't go out of my way to be nice, but I do go out of my way to make it clear to my students that whatever I'm doing so that they can become better creators.
Me, I'm finding myself more and more telling students that you're not just after that numerical grade, and this is not just for comic students, for students in general, that what you're doing, and I tell them, that's why I showed you the thesis, okay, earlier, because I'm telling them, what's the point of university, right? Because I'm going to school, yes, you get a job, so on and so forth, but what's the purpose? I make them see how to take even what they're doing academically seriously, especially in, for example, when they do their thesis. Like, you are contributing to, hopefully, the knowledge of the community. You know, and I tell them stories about students who are looking at zines, for example, where nobody has written about zines. And I tell them, where did this student find information? From student thesis, from fellow students. And that's why I take even the academic part seriously when they write papers, because you're creating texts, even if they're academic, for future. This is not just, so you're not just gonna wing it and bahala na, whatever. You take it seriously because because future students will also read it. That's why whenever I advise students who are graduating, I let them, yes, there are other sources, but that's the cool thing about comics and other these new media. It's actually the students who are also generating knowledge, right? So I tell them, go to mass comm, some students have written on this. Go to this, they'll say, sir, I have, first of course they go to the reliable text of writers, but when they can't find it, because since it's so new, I tell them, no, look at students, what they did, what they've studied. And so in effect, and I just gave this to my freshman class, so that they can look into their future. What you're doing is your thesis is not just something you pass and you can forget it. It's something that you should for future people, future generations. You are scholars, and especially that's UP. They always hear it, scholar ng bayan, whatever, and I tell them this is what it means. Okay? You are a scholar for the country. Future people, it doesn't even have to be future. Even your peers, as you're working on it, they will hopefully gain from what you're doing. So I find myself, maybe it's getting old, I find myself doing that more and more just to see them, to see, because usually you get slackers or, whatever, and that's the thing I'm hoping to communicate to, that, as Carl said, the grade is not a definition of just a person, but meaning you do have worth, and hopefully other people, if you work hard at it, take it seriously, other people will benefit from what you're doing, and they can benefit. That whatever is beneficial starts now. Don't in the future I'm going to do this. What you're doing can matter. And this is especially exciting in terms of comics and new media, because who else is doing it? The older people aren't. Okay, where else will you find knowledge? The people who do it, who practice it, no. So hopefully. We'll see how it works. I just gave that whole spiel to my English 10 classes. And, these things like that.
Do you think these subjects you teach should be taught in other colleges or universities or schools? Do you think they're open to the idea of having subjects like these taught in their schools?
I think so, yeah. Now, if they're open, that depends on whoever is in charge, but I think, yeah. The idea is, here's an interesting thing, right? People keep saying comics are dead, the traditional comics, but no. The medium itself is always there. So I think, yeah.
I think the growth of Komikon, you guys just did
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
crazy. You guys, congratulations, you guys.
Yeah, in fact, I always tell students it's exciting. Whenever I read, whenever I watch documentaries on comics, in a number of them I've been part of it, I still get disappointed because they say, oh, sana ang comics, patay na ang comics. You know, the last time from TV5, I'm like, why didn't they put that? The latter part, yeah, because I remember in my interview, I talked so much about what's happening now. You know, I even showed them the people that were nominated for the National Book Awards, all these things. But when I watched the entire thing, it's like, that was cut out. It's like nostalgia. Wala na comics. Buhayin natin. It's like you're stuck in this limbo of missing the past and trying to look into the future when things are already happening in the present.
That's like spoken out of ignorance.
I know,
Doing
right?
that kind of stuff, or
Right.
like trying to close out a story or something.
Yeah,
It's just,
yeah.
But if it's a matter of teaching them in subjects, it's so weird to always have to defend like the academic pursuit of comics. If only because we pursue and study so much stupid stuff. Like there's so much stupidity that we're willing to engage in the academic sphere. Like I have no problems going to like an art exhibit and bullshitting my way through my appreciation of it just by having a fair amount of art theory jargon in my head. So like I don't know why the conversation even has to happen. Like, should we be talking about but it's something that always has to happen whenever you're confronted with a department head or with whoever's in charge of designing it. I have been fortunate enough that in UP, when I came in, Emil was already teaching it, and then when I was recruited over at Ateneo, I was recruited specifically because I have this like capacity to teach comics. So it's that like basically opening it up because I think that students will take it. Like even if it's not a required course, I think if you drop a comics course into any university, any college, people will enroll because of like the gigantic base of people who read and enjoy comics. And so the question is, will it get offered? I don't think that you have to do a study anymore if people will enroll. So it's, will departments offer it? And then two, will the departments have capacity? Which is to say that will they employ teachers who can actually teach the subject? So those are the two caveats to the thing. Because like in UP, how many of us? And I'm no longer there, but like it's her Emil.
How many students do you have in UCAS? How many segments or any?
Well, in CW it has to be 15.
Yeah.
The limit is 15, and it's always full.
Yeah.
Sometimes I go to 18 because
Yeah.
some people were pre-run. But yeah,
Same.
same.
It's usually a 15 student limit, and then there's somebody who'll run up and say, please, 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 please. And then what also happens in my classes is usually I'll get a creative team. So like the writer will be enrolled in class, and then their artist will sit in, even if they're not enrolled.
Yeah.
So
That's happened.
that
Do
works.
you only have one class per sem? Or do you...
One comics class per
units,
sem.
9 units?
One comics class per se.
The literature one is different. It's 25. And sometimes they don't know it's comics. Even when they already put it there, we announce it. When I say this is popular literature comics, some people are like, what? But yeah, but that's a CL course. So that's different. That's different.
Yeah, I think like even if it were offered as a literature class, I think a lot of people would enroll.
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
I imagine it. You know, there's so many ways to teach comics as a literature
Yeah.
class. You can do historical, you can do genre, you can do gender studies, you can do whatever.
I have
There's so much you can do.
Yeah, I have 10, almost, let's see, about 8 students I think, for the grad class. That they knew. So it was CL, Comparative Literature 298, which is special topics. And I made, and it was for comics. I had 8 students, which is pretty good.
And I've already developed a comics as literature syllabus for Ateneo. We'll see what happens with that.
Yeah. Will it be a regular class?
The grand plan is to just offer more comics classes because they started off with comic illustration, so it's comic illustration, so they're spreading comics and hopefully comics as literature, and then even more.
So, kasi it's like fine arts. You know, ano makukuha mo dyan? May trabaho ba dyan?
Yeah.
What do you, wala akong kikitain dyan. Gagawa ka ng comics? Sabi mo dyan. Wala ka naman makukuha yung trabaho ng comics. So, what the students get from taking classes like, ano, pinag-aaralan yung comics? Ano makukuha mo dyan? Like, what do you get from learning about Marvel, DC Comics? Ano naman gagawin mo sa buhay dyan, di ba? So, what do the students get out? Or meron bang nag-complain na parent na, ano yan? Why are you offering that?
Does McLeod say like, are these just things that have no function in the world?
Right.
They're not supposed to have function.
Yeah, yeah. But me, aside from, I had a former student who became an editor for a book. Actually, OMF, plug. Yeah, and then, so he's an editor there, and then they decided to republish a comic series from the US. He actually argued with the creator because he was commenting on some bad paneling, and the creator was like, oh, no. And then so he had to convince him to change the paneling. Because they were actually just translating it from English. Actually, no, it's still in English. They just changed it. The original character was Singaporean, and they changed it to Filipino. So the Filipino edition had a Filipino character, and they had to change little things. And then he was saying that there was a paneling problem with a certain part. And then he was like, no. And then he was like, no. So he convinced the creator to change a little. Then he told me, sir, naalala ko yung pinag-aralan natin dun sa paneling and, in college. So that's it, you never know, especially now, right? If you're editing, if you're working not just in comics, publishers, book publishers are publishing, even Anilo's with Adarna, right?
Yeah.
So when you say practical things, yeah, knowledge of comics will really help if you're working as an editor and they're branching out into comics. That's how you.
Yeah.
That's one example.
But on the practical side, well, there's the art appreciation, which is
Yeah.
yung art side. But on the practical sense, you look at it naman, it's applicable naman to a lot of other mediums. Like if you're into film, you need to storyboard it, so there are also comic elements there. A lot of are in advertising.
Advertising. A lot of people end up there.
Yeah, but there's a lot of critical tools, whether it's actually mapera naman ng comics, but kaya ngayon naman ng election.
Actually.
Do you want to work for them or not? Yun naman yung question though.
And even government, that's what we learned in government agencies. They have money, and then they need comics to teach people about health and finance.
So, success yun ang ethics na lang yun. But yung Meron
I
na.
just think like communication is a basic core skill. It's an incredibly undervalued skill. Communication and writing
Yeah.
are super undervalued. Like people presume that if they can put words on the page, they can write. It's one of the most annoying things, and that's why there's an undervaluation of writers. And that's why writers get underpaid.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when you think about like the kind of communication that you can have when you can manipulate the comics medium, that means essentially that you have the capacity to deal with both visual language and with written language. So it's just like parents.
Wala nang questions, we can close na yung talks. Are there any questions?
Final
questions?
You can summarize the question, because if you don't, then the last thing I say is like me telling parents. It's something else. Yes, please.
Not to tell the parents to shut the fuck up, but how would you actually convince a parent to let their kids take up this?
It's not my
Or
job.
tell, or coach a kid out of high school who wants to sign up for college in a comics creation course.
If you want to do it, you'll do it.
Well, for now, there's
How do we
not-
coach
yeah.
them?
For now, it's still just elective, right? So I don't think there's much of an issue there. It's only when it becomes a full, right, course. But even then, right? You don't look at it as just comics per se. It's about communication. It's about art appreciation. It's about discipline in writing. It practically applies to any course actually. It's just
But this opens up the problem of thinking of the university education as an investment.
yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
So it's not indicative of, because what's happening here is you're framing the discourse in such a way that the comics class and the comics creator is on the defensive. It's like, well, why do you need to exist? It's a terrible way to frame like the humanities conversation, because that's like, dude, it's a fucking university, like universal man. You don't go to the university so that you can get a degree so you can get a job. This is the greatest misconception, and this is why there's privatization of education. This is why people quantify. If I spend this much money, then my kid should be earning this much, and whatever. It's a total like it's a broken system which is being perpetuated so that people can make money off of things. Like I sound super crazy right now, and I sound like I'm spewing conspiracy theories, but it's the worst way to look at an education, right? And education makes you human, and I don't even want to like engage but how do you become human without the capacity to communicate? And what are the most primitive ways that we've communicated? Through speech and through image, right? And to say, well, what the fuck am I gonna do with like comics and the ability to communicate? There is no job apart from like, no, there is no job where you have no communication with anyone else. Even the most remote and isolated work will require some level of communication. But again, this is more telling not of the problem of comics, but more telling of the problem of how we view education. And how we view like educational institutions as just processes through which one can acquire money. It kind of, and I appreciate the question, but it's a question that like really hits a nerve for me because
That's because there's already a mindset. So how do we
no, that's why I'm like,
It's again, the same thing can be said for poetry. Right? I'm going to be a major in poetry. It's just a comic, sadly, double whammy. At least poetry have respectability.
yeah, but I mean again, that's still like
exactly. That's
the same thing can be said for going to law school.
Exactly. No, the thing is, what Carl is saying, actually, if you look at it, the very concept of university is originally that. Liberal education, university, unity and diversity, right? It's getting all these things and to be human. That's the original goal. of university. And that's why all
Universal man.
and that's what I've been always, and that's what I also I keep reminding my students. The concept of university is that. It's not to, you know, again, to basically, before, you either went to university or you go to vocational school. If you want to make money and everything like that, you go to another, university is something, but eventually what happened, you know, like university became required for everyone, and the idea of going to university to find a job, basically that's what happened. If you think about it, that university was supposed to be, again, improve communication. That's what improve, you know, appreciation of art. All of them go together.
Actually,
Yeah.
another purpose for universities was ideally was to expand human knowledge.
Yeah, that's the point. Yeah.
Yeah. What we're looking at is a dehumanizing process. When you go to higher education and you're there because you need to get a job, that's dehumanizing because you're being crafted into a mechanical product, right? You're being crafted into an employee that can. Shall I begin? Where does middle school come from? It comes from like aristocrats who did not want to do accounting, and that's why you started formal education. Like the beginnings of formal educational systems are rooted in oligarchies and the passing on of oligarchical duties like trade and stuff. So the only reason why you have a middle class is because you have this ruling up. I'm sounding crazy, but you have this ruling upper class who needs people to do their shit that they don't want to do. So it's this constant offloading. And so when you frame the discourse in that way, it's just total dehumanization, right? And I think like if we're talking about these kinds of things, then I can still bring it back around to say that comics is this process through which we can deconstruct these like very dominant structures. We can start questioning these things. We gave the same we were at the same talk at the DFA and we were talking about the concept of cultural diplomacy and reestablishing our position. And I really think like that. Here's like the thing. We're always making comics because so many comics creators are so focused on becoming like a Marvel or DC artist. When one of the greatest things that we can really do is just to make great comics. And these great comics will transcend borders. They will connect to a larger humanity. And that's what you see when you have something like Jerry's Elmer getting nominated for the Eisner. There is a larger human connection that can be established. So if we're looking at, well, pag-graduate ng anak ko, magkano yung sweldo niya? Well, fuck, dude. Like, what percentage of our graduating population is just gonna be in a BPO anyway? Right? So why even bother to ask that question when maybe they can tell this one really, really important story that will transcend? I feel like that investing 3 units of your entire college load in this really artistic attempt should not have to be justified.
And even if you look at superheroes, how did they get their power in the first place? Right? You're reading about Jewish immigrants from Cleveland and New York, you know, trying to better their families, and yet then they create this icon like Superman, which permeates the entire, you know, the global consciousness. And where did that come from? See, you know, because somebody, you know, these people, yes, there were a lot of backstabbing going on, but these people, you know, were doing something that, hey, wait a minute, right? You know, because when you create an enduring character, when you do your best, you write it well, and then, you know, it's not always, it's not, of course, it's not a fixed formula, but when you create something that endures and lasts and transcends, and that's the thing, right? Transcends your own culture. I mean, look at what superheroes, where they are now. I mean, starting from these poor immigrant kids, you know, just drawing for, you know, for a pittance, right? And yet, yes, you know, yes, it's the corporations who get most of the money, but at least now, right? They finally credited Bill Finger, right, for Batman, right? Finally, and of course, finally, before that, Jerry Siegel and Joe Schuster. At least now,
Kirby getting some of that Marvel money.
Kirby's getting some of that Marvel money. So at least, you know, because of that, right? And it's not because of, to me, it's not because of some boardroom discussion, but it's looking at, it's fans and people and critics looking at the legacy of these characters and then looking at what these creators did. Ayun.
On a local level, I mean, it's just great to walk out, every once in a while and sit outside and just watch people read comics.
Actually.
They go, they sit out there, and they're sitting out there on the curb reading.
Yeah.
That's an amazing moment of like connection between artist and reader. And that's like not quantifiable.
Yeah. That's a better way to end it.